I think this is the biggest fraud in the history of our constitutional republic. It's taking place right before our eyes.
What is your opinion as to the validity of the numbers that were certified today by the Secretary of State and the governor about this election?
If I was an executive at a publicly traded company, I would never sign that because I risk jail time and having all my money taken from me in lawsuits. So to answer your question, I would never, ever have certified. I'd rather resign than have certified those results.
So your professional opinion is that the numbers are fraudulent?
I believe they're fraudulent based on the data. I'd be willing to put my life on it.
Next up, we have Mr. Bob Piton.
So basically what I've identified is that there's between 120,000 and 306,000 fake people. And I did this by looking at the data, and I'm not going to go over this sheet just yet. I want to kind of just highlight the bigger picture so that, because, numbers can be, I love numbers, but they could be a little boring. So I want to kind of tell the story to the numbers. But basically, what I did is I took a completely different approach than what's been presented up to this point, based on the little that I've heard here. There's approximately 1,500 precincts in Arizona, and there's 3 classifications for male, female, and then you. I guess maybe that's the undecided classification. And then there's 5 different types of voters. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hard Republican, moderate, swing, moderate Democrat, hard Democrat. So there's 5 categories. And what I did is I looked through the age rolls, so 18 to 100, and I basically created a unique bucket, so to speak, for each of those classifications. So it turns out there's about 980,000 plus unique Arizona voters. And the way what I did is I didn't look at the total, I looked at the number of registered voters in the state. Because if the core data set is flawed, everything else that happens afterwards is irrelevant, in my opinion. Because, so I kind of took an approach of how is the thing constructed. It was a very tedious process to organize all this. But then, once I got that organized, I broke out all of the male 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 votes. So I want you to think about okay, there's 5 classifications of male voters in the state of Arizona. I summed up and looked at how many of those votes by age, 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds, across all those different categories. And then I did the same thing for females. And then I did the same thing for the U's. And this is, it was absolutely mind-boggling what popped out as a result of this incredibly tedious process. The correlation of men that voted in Arizona, so the first category, 1, the number 1 voter versus 2, 1 versus 3, 1 versus 4, 1 versus 5, and then making sure that all possible combinations of male voters was accounted for. The average of those correlations for male voters is approximately 63.83%. That makes sense because people as they age, they're kind of random. They may fall into maybe they're liberal one time, maybe they're conservative the other time. They kind of bounce around, and the variation, the standard deviation, is very high, as it should. People's life cycle changes. It's about 30%. So then I did the same thing for females. Now, I mean, I can ask a silly question, but I said no. My wife told me no jokes. But I'll get to the punchline. Are women more predictable than men when it comes to voting? Are they more independent? Now, people's first answer seems to be, oh, they'll do more of what their correlation should be higher, and actually the opposite is true. They're at about 58%. So about 6 points higher, 6 points lower in terms of the correlation doing the same analysis. And that makes sense because most women don't want to tell you what they're doing when they go in the voting booth. So that's the joke. But anyways, so then what I did is I did the same thing for the U's. Now keep in mind, there's a total...
Bobby, excuse me. When you say use, you're talking about undisclosed, not youths, as in
U's.
younger.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I like that from my cousin Vinny. Hey, there you go.
I'm glad you got the joke, Mr. Mayor.
The two Utes. So what is a Ute? But so basically, once I did that, there's 463,660 classified that I found under this category. I did that same analysis. Now keep in mind, the standard deviation for men was about 32.8%. For women, it was 35.77%. That there would be a lot of randomness through time across the aging process of human beings. With regards to the U, when I did that same analysis, 94% plus correlation. Let me say that again. 94% correlation. And I was like, this is insane. Like, this is like fictitious. It's like this. And now keep in mind, I came up with this by going through all 1,500 precincts and unbundling all the data age by age across their sexual, the M, F, and U, and then also what type of voter were they. So this is, and I happen to love data, so this was fun for me because I'm like, I have an idea of how they're cheating. I think they're cheating. So I'm going to test this theory out, and I'm more than happy to provide this to Mayor Giuliani. And so it was 94%. So then the next thing I did, I was like, oh, well, I want to see if something's wrong with the data. What should I do to make sure that I'm not wrong with this? Because I don't want to embarrass myself. So what I did is I took the buckets and I computed what does the distribution look like per age. So like, okay, how many, when I look at, hold on a second here. When I look at the buckets, how many U's are there in the first type of voter, second, third, fourth, fifth? And what I found is there's about 14,000 across time, 14,225, and on the type 1 Republicans. There's 122,203 type 2s, but what's fascinating is it's almost symmetrical on the type 4s. So 120,000. And I asked my son, I'm like, hey, what do you think in terms of the U's? If you're conservative, are you more likely to go unclassified or just throw that in or fill it out based on your sex? He's like, you fill it out based on your sex. So it's like, so then I looked at that data and I found that it's a bell-shaped curve. So if you looked at the ages and you went from 100 down to 18, the curve of the data is a nice bell shape. In the middle is 186,202 swing voters. The wings are 122,000 type 2, 120,000 type 4, and 14,000 type 1, and 20,000 type 5. But here's the kicker. When I'm like, okay, let's unpack each year. So the 18-year-olds, the 19-year-olds, what's that look like when I do that? And I ran a max function. So it's like, obviously 0 is the min. And then what's the maximum number of U votes in any given precinct in Arizona? So fair enough. I trade in the markets. I like to see what's the min max, what's the range. I run that number, and then I ran the correlation of the maxes versus the, hold on a second, versus what the average number of votes per age group took place, and I ran that correlation. And would you believe it? It's over 97%. So it's like, holy cow, I think I reverse engineered the algorithm that they're using to do these damn votes. But unless you're willing to create 980,000 buckets, you're going to have a hard time seeing it. Because everybody's used to doing the data, bundle it up. Only look at the type 1, look at the type 2, and in this algorithm, I mean, basically what the data is showing, and I think, frankly, this is a call out to our President Trump. Please, please, please do this for the entire country. I think we deserve an audit of every county in America after seeing this. And so basically, so now I'd like to go, before I even started this minutia project, that's what I call it, the minutia project. This took me over 25 hours to do. I decided, you know what, I like to look at metadata. So metadata, you guys should look into it if you don't know what it is. I don't want to get into a philosophical discussion about it, but metadata is, I said, okay, if I landed in Arizona, I want to understand what's been going on in Arizona before I say anything. And I pulled back, on your website, you have 22 years of election results, going back to 1998. So this is what's up here. And what I did is, I think I'm using this. Is that me? Okay. So basically, what I did is I went to the census, and I pulled the census data on Arizona by each county. So I looked at 2000, I looked at 2010, I looked at the estimate for 2019, and then you can see I calculated what the annualized growth rate of each county was, and then what the growth rate was from 2000 to 2010, which is column B. And then I looked at column C, which is, what was it from 2010 to 2019, and I extrapolated the data for one more year because we don't have the 2020 results. So I kind of went through this whole process, and I did that before the minutia, and I wanted to see, like, okay, well, what does the census say with regards to how many people are of voting age? So if I scroll down, you could see over here, right now, for example, 27% of Apache is under the age of 18. This is, once again, I didn't use any of my own data. I used government data. So if there's a problem, take it up with the government. So basically, I computed what is the number of voters per year. Now, keep in mind, since the census doesn't come out every year, I had to fill in based on the annualized growth rate between each census and kind of adjust it accordingly, because I don't want to just spitball it. I wanted it to be tied to the math and make sure that each year filled out. So then from there, I went in and physically typed in all of the reported eligible voters each year. Because I got to tell you, Arizona does not make it easy to standardize, to pull down the data in each county. Anyways, I had to go physically do this, which is time consuming, but I thought it was extremely important for what I was asked to do. So I did that, and then I did the reported ballots cast, and then I did that each year for each of the 2-year cycles. And then I typed in the number of precincts that were reported. And then as I kind of do that, I came up with reported eligible voters as a percentage of total population. Once I did that, registered eligible voters as a percentage of voting age population. So here's where it gets interesting. So I kind of did that, and I'm like, okay, I concur with Dr. Shiva that I think voting fraud has been happening in this state and possibly nationwide much longer than the past 4 years. I'm looking at the data, and it looks as though it's going back to at least 2008.
What are you guys going to do about it?
I don't know.
Okay.
It's above my pay grade. So
if we have any more of that, we'll ask to have you removed from the room. I've asked several times. Please hold your comments. We've been okay with some applause, but the purpose of this hearing is to gather information. Let me be really clear about that. Mr. Piton, if you can, I need to have you wrap this up within the next couple of minutes, okay?
I will. I'll wrap it up right now. Can I grab one of these waters, though? Is that all right?
Big pardon?
Is that?
Yeah, help
Thank
yourself.
You. So basically, what I did is I looked at the 2000 presidential election, 2004, 2008, and I looked at all the eligible voters, and that's in column S here. And I said, okay, how many eligible voters showed up to vote in those 3 presidential cycles? Then I tied it to 2008, 12, 16 as a pivot. And I said, wow, it went from 79% in Apache to 86.93%. But then the change from the average of 2008, 12, 16 presidential cycle went from 87% to 99% of all eligible voters in Apache voted in 2020 is what the data is. That's how many registered voters there are. It's like, what? 99%? So since I'm in a little bit of a rush, I went through and did that for each of the counties and showed what the results look like in each respective presidential year, the 3 years, and then the off years to compare those two numbers. And the correlation, once again,
the difference between those 2 years,
the difference between those 2 years, if it's a presidential cycle versus a regular cycle, there's about an 88% correlation. That should give you some idea of how meaningful that 94% was.
And so
I went through and did that.
Same thing with the ballots cast as a percentage of the total population. Ballots cast as a percentage of Arizona population, and a couple of things I want to highlight since I'm running out of time. The population of Arizona has gone up by about 1% per year the past decade. The number of people voting per year has gone up by about 7% per year. Now that may not seem like a big deal.
It may not seem like a big deal. But if you had $100,000 and you invested it at 1% after a decade, you'd have $111,000.
But if you had $100,000
and you invested it at 7% per decade, you'd have $195,000.
Wait a second.
So it's like, wait a second. How is it that you have 95,000 versus 11,000? So when you look at the differential growth rates, that's how meaningful it is. That this has been occurring going back a decade. It's almost somebody was maybe cheating a little bit somewhere, and then they needed to cheat a little bit more, and then they needed to cheat a little bit more. And the reason why I say this is, being in the financial markets my whole career, Sarbanes-Oxley, remember that? Everybody remember WorldCom and Enron? They had to sign. The CFO and the CEO have to sign the financials, the 10K and 10Q, which is in force since the 1933 and 1934 Securities Act. Guess who was exempted from that act? Counties and states. Maybe they should be not exempted anymore. If you're going to sign something when billions of dollars are on the line, we should believe in the data. We have the CEOs get clawed back. We get the CFOs jail time. So if you cheat, there should be repercussions. And the laws are on the books for this. All we have to do is, here, I'll give you an example. If you're a CEO of a company and it's worth $20 billion and there's a fraud internally and somebody steals $1 billion, if you don't prosecute them and you don't uncover it and investigate it, you're violating your fiduciary responsibility, you're going to get fired, you're going to get sued, and the investors are going to take you through the ringer. But for some reason in politics, that doesn't happen, which is mind-boggling, because this country's worth $100 trillion. This election about controlling $100 trillion of wealth in the United States is very serious business. And so this is one of the reasons, so I'm kind of wrapping it up here because I know you asked me to cut it short.
Mr. Piton, can we do 60 seconds?
60 seconds.
I think
60
Mr.
seconds.
Giuliani may have a question for you.
So the population of Arizona has gone up by 40% since 2000. The number of voters in 1998 in Arizona was 1.1 million. It's 3.2 million today. So it's like tripled, but the population's up 40%. Something's off.
Thank you, sir. Mayor Giuliani?
If you could just tell us in the simplest way possible, as an expert, what is your opinion as to the validity of the numbers that were certified today by the Secretary of State and the governor about this election?
If I was an executive at a publicly traded company, I would never sign that because I risked jail time and having all my money taken from me in lawsuits. So to answer your question, I would never, ever have certified. I'd rather resign than have certified those results.
So your professional opinion is that the numbers are fraudulent?
I believe they're fraudulent based on the data. And my sister asked me a simple question this morning. She goes, "How sure are you?" And my sister's a pretty stubborn person like me. And I said, I'd be willing to put my life on it. I'm that sure about the analysis, assuming that the data that I got from the state and everything else was accurate. So, if you give me all inaccurate data from everywhere, then, that's my only caveat.
And could you tell us your professional background, please?
I'm a portfolio manager. I have I had my CFA since I was 23. I got my MBA from Kellogg in organizational design and strategy. I'm working on a financial engineering degree at the moment. I like math for fun. I believe
we can
math
see
is the
that.
language of the universe. And
Well, thank you very much.
Okay.
Very helpful.